Today I'm going to show you how to make this Valorant thumbnail in Photoshop right now. Alright, now here is the thumbnail that I created, and it literally took me no time at all. So if you're uploading your video right now and you're looking for a really quick solution, this probably took me 10-15 minutes max. So I'm going to get started. I already created a file with the layers or the assets that I'm going to use. So all I did was just go to File, New, and then created a 920 by 1080 aspect ratio and made the color black. And I know YouTube exports only accepts 720p, so we'll finish that in the export settings, so don't worry about it now. So here's my 920 by 1080 canvas. First, I just added a random Valorant background. You can find a lot of these in a lot of packs. A lot of them are free. So if you need any recommendations, just ask me in my Discord. I can link you a bunch. Links are in the description. But anyways, this is just a background I added. So I just made sure I press Ctrl T so it kind of fills the whole frame. Press enter and we're going to add a gradient map. So just go down to your adjustments window here and I'm going to press the last one that says gradient map. And I'm just going to hold Alt when I go to the layers tab and go in between the layers. So you should get this little arrow and a square icon here. I'm just going to click. That's going to clipping mask it to the layer below it. I'm going to click on this bar right here. That's going to let me customize the colors. You should have an option that's just black to white. So what I'm going to do is change this white color by double clicking it and selecting a very, very dark gray color here. Press OK, OK. Now you have your background. Next thing I'm going to add is my character render. Again, these are in packs. A lot of them are free. I made this one myself in Blender. If you know how to do that, that's great. But anyways, I'm just going to drag them in and you can size them. Usually you want to keep them on the right hand side of the thumbnail just in case. Next thing I'm going to add is a bunch of lighting and effects to this thing. So I'm going to add a smoke. Again, this is just off Google. You can really find it wherever. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Ctrl U while selecting the layer, and it's going to bring up this window. I'm going to bring the saturation down, click OK, and then hit Ctrl L on the same layer. I'm going to play with these tabs out. I'm going to drag this farther one closer to the middle and drag this middle one closer to the right, and this should make this smoke a lot darker. And now you've gone from this really light blue smoke to this really dark and grungy smoke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably press Ctrl T and size it up, put it in the corner here so it's covering the omen a bit, and then press Ctrl J and take the smoke and drag it behind the omen. Press Ctrl T and make it a bit bigger and rotate it a bit so it looks a bit different. I'm going to just put it in place here so the omen is kind of surrounded in smoke. I'm going to press Ctrl J once more and add some smoke in the corner here that I am going to use later. So now I'm going to do the lighting next, which is probably the most complicated part, but once you get a lot of practice in it, it's not really too bad. So I'm just going to create a new layer by pressing this plus here. I'm going to grab a purple because that's the color I want to use for this thumbnail. You can obviously use whatever color you want, and that really goes with anything. If you don't want to use omen, just use whatever character you want. So I'm going to press B to bring up my brush, make sure my brush is purple. I'm going to use the square brackets to be able to control the size, so I'm just gonna make this brush a bit smaller and just press a few times almost inside the middle of the character so you get kind of a glow on the outside. I'm just gonna click a few times, so now you kind of got this glow outside on the outsides of omen. So I'm just gonna, with the layer selected, go to where it says normal, this is the blending layer, and select screen. Now I'm going to create another layer, doing the same thing, create new layer. And this time with my brush, I'm going to select the lighter purple, not entirely white, but sort of a whitish purple. So I'm just going to, with a smaller brush, I'm going to go closer to the edge of the character and just paint around the edges. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. I'm just going to dot some white on the edges to kind of amplify that glow effect. So now of course you got the glow effect, but it doesn't look too good because it is not actually affecting or has any effect on this character render itself. So what I'm going to do, selecting the character render, I'm going to go to my adjustments, and I'm going to add a hue and saturation. I'm going to do the same thing by holding Alt, going in between the layers and creating a clipping mask like that. So it's clipping mask to the omen. I'm going to hit colorize in this properties tab. I'm going to drag the saturation up to around usually 70, and same thing for lightness. I'm going to drag it up to plus 40. Might need to change it later, but also make sure that this is on purple. If it's not, or if whatever color you chose. So if it's not the main color you chose, you can just drag this hue slider. So I'm just going to drag it here. And that's the color I'm looking for. Next, I'm going to click this white box right on the hue and saturation layer. This will change our properties, and if you drag down, you should see a button that says Invert. So now there's basically nothing here. But if you take your brush, make it white, and you make it fairly small, and you just want to go to the edges of your render and just paint wherever the glow is. So this really just comes down to a lot of experience, but wherever the glow is and it looks like the glow would affect the character, it comes down to a lot of personal taste. But wherever I see this glow, I'm just going to paint the edge. And of course, when you get really good at it, it won't be just the edges. There will be a lot of different platforms and a lot of different parts that you want to highlight. But for now, this looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go along every edge where the highlight is fairly strong. I'm just going to take my white brush and paint it in. Also, if there are any spots that you do not want, you can press X if black is your foreground color, or you can just select the black color if it's really easier for you, and you can just kind of paint away what you don't want. So white adds the layer style to here, and black kind of takes it away almost as an eraser. So now that's pretty much done. If you want to, you can also make sure that your omen layer is rasterized. So just make sure you click rasterize layer, and you can take your blur tool right here. I usually keep the strength at 100%, and just blur where the glow is really white, or just like light in general. So right here, here, the glow is pretty strong, so it's pretty light. So I just take my blur tool and I blur the edges of omen. Basically after that, all I do is do the same thing with the hue and saturation layer, except add a curves layer. So I'm just going to adjustments, curves, click on it, and I'm just going to hold Alt between the layer, click on it, and I'm going to take the first notch of my curve and bring it all the way probably towards half. Now obviously he's very dark, so I'm just going to do the same thing. Click on this box here, scroll down, hit Invert. I'm going to do the same thing with my brush, except I'm going to highlight the middle, almost the middle inside of him, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to inside. It really just darkens the inner part. So if you know what a satin is in the blending options, that's pretty much what it does. But basically in the center, I am darkening, which creates a lot of contrast and makes the edges of the glow really shine through. So I'm just gonna, and any place that would have a shadow or would look really dark, I'm just going to paint over. Alright, after that I have added some particles. These you can pretty much find in any pack, free or not, or you can make them yourself. They're really just white dots. And just make sure if they're on normal, put them on screen. I just put them in the middle of my composition. And next thing I'm going to do to also work on the lighting is create a new layer, get a purple color with my brush, make it pretty big, and you want to make sure the hardness is definitely on 0. wherever the, like, on the edges of the glow, I'm just going to add some big blotches. I'm going to set them to screen and decrease the opacity to around 50. And I might also take my eraser tool and erase some of the parts that cover our character. So after that, I'm going to try and worry about text now. So I'm just thinking of the most generic title ever, but whatever title you have should work. So I'm just gonna type in Omen gameplay. Now for the fonts, I'll have Omen in this font right here, Momentum Extended, and gameplay, I'm going to choose a very vertical font, something like Delirium. These fonts are free for you to buy, or not buy, they're free for you to download. You can literally search up the name, free, and then download, and there should be sites available for you to download them. So I'm just going to size them up. I'm going to make sure the text are pretty much the same width. I'm going to drag it down a bit so to give it some space. I'm going to press shift while clicking them both. Press Control T so I can size them both up. Make them pretty big. All your thumbnail titles should be fairly large. And I'm going to drag these two layers to behind the Omen, but actually in front of the smokes, so it doesn't cover too much. The next thing I'm going to do is add some layer styles. So on gameplay, I'm just going to have it pretty much as a white text with a gray to white gradient. So I'm just going to double click the text layer, hit gradient overlay. I already have this selected, but just make sure that you have two notches. One is sort of a slight gray, and then one is pure white. Hit OK, and have everything normal, opacity 100. And you can really just copy these settings. The next thing I'm going to do is add an inner glow. Make sure it's on white on overlay 100%. Distance is 2, choke is, and size is 0, and the angle I usually like to put in the left corner. Next thing I'm going to do is for the Omen text, which is just going to be a purple gradient, so just double click again. Gradient, and this time I'm going to use my black to white gradient just for reference. And I'm just going to choose a purple, a pretty vibrant purple, and then a pretty light purple, almost bordering magenta, kind of. You can really do this. Whatever gradient works for you, press OK, and then when you do the same thing with inner shadow, same thing I did for the gameplay text, I'm going to hit OK. Now our text is pretty good. If you want to get a bit fancier, I'm going to take my Omen layer of the character, press Ctrl J. I'm going to drag it the layer above this gameplay text I have here. I want to make sure that I right click the gameplay text, hit convert to smart object, hold Alt, clipping mask the Omen to the gameplay text, go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Oh, make sure you do it on top of the Omen character, Gaussian blur, and something around 5 maybe. And then press Ctrl U and drag down the lightness to -100. I'm just going to drag while holding shift the blurred layer, and maybe make the opacity 60 or 50. You can change the opacity with your keyboard by just hitting the number. Like I'm just hitting the number 5 and it's giving me 50 opacity. So it just adds a shadow over top of the text. Might do actually 60. So that's basically it, except now I'm going to kind of do a rush version of a color correction tutorial. All I'm going to do is go to my adjustments, go to curves. I'm just going to do a simple S curve. I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of it, but just drag down the notch right here. You can basically just copy what I'm doing. I'm just going to make a simple S with this line. I'm going to go to color lookup, go to load 3D LUT, and go to 3-step strip look. I'm going to change the fill to 50. I'm going to grab a gradient map. Make sure the gradient map is this black to white. So this should be in monochrome right now. I'm going to switch my opacity to soft light and change the opacity to around 10%. Now I am pretty much done This is really all the CCs I think you really need. Next thing I'm going to do is pretty much do what I've done in a tutorial already, which was my camera raw tutorial and how to export. So I'm just going to do that pretty quickly. You can really just copy my settings. I'm just going to hit Control Alt Shift E all at the same time. That's going to combine all my layers into one layer. I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw. I'm going to wait for that to load. And you can really just copy my settings here. So once I'm done, I'll let you pause the video in case you want to copy them. They really work for every type of thumbnail. Temperature -8, tint to +9. I'm going to bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows, bring up the whites, bring down the blacks. I'm going to increase the texture to +10, clarity around 30, and dehaze to around 8. Next thing I'm going to do is go to calibration. Kind of looks like a film sort of logo. I'm going to go to the blue primaries and I'm going to put it to +13. I'm going to go to green, +10. This is really just personal preference, so if you don't like the setting I'm using, feel free to change it. I'm going to go to +16 on the reds. And I'm going to go to effects, post-crop vignetting, amount, usually around 40, -40. Midpoint, I'm going to change to probably around 65. And for style, highlight priority, change it to color priority, and hit OK. Next thing I'm going to do is go to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. Now this is a custom one. This should be at 200, but you want to change it to just 100 and hit OK. Next thing I'm going to do is hold Control Shift R. That's going to bring up the lens correction. All you got to do is to the right here, go to Custom, and change the fixed red cyan fringe to -85, or maybe around -60. And that should add an RGB split to your thumbnail. And that is pretty much it. We have accomplished a full thumbnail in around 15 minutes, which is pretty good. So anyways, if you have any questions, join me live on Twitch, ask me there. Links are in the description. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.